Well, thank you for joining us for our April Share support video. My name is Rachel Delacroze, and I am on the board of Share of Lancaster. I am a lost mom. I have two daughters that passed during pregnancy. Audrey, who passed away, she had Turner syndrome. And my son was a twin with his sister Colette, and she passed away during pregnancy, and I have a living son who is almost 7. Angie, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Angie Chelton. I am also a lost mom. I have also had two losses. My first baby, Callan, passed in the eight week of pregnancy, and my son, Callan, Anderl, passed in my 22nd week of pregnancy. So it's been 17 and 18 years for me. I am raising 5 living children, 2 biological, 1 adopted, and 2 foster.
Thank you, Angie. So our topic for this month is secondary losses. Now, when Allie, who runs the group, in-person group, brought up this topic, I initially thought secondary losses is just multiple losses. So I was thinking about my second loss and that, but I think this is the whole reason she brought this topic up, because that's what everybody assumes. It's like you need to have the physical loss of that life to make it considered a loss and put it in that category. But actually, secondary loss, I'm going to read this to you just so you have a clear idea. The death of our child is termed as a primary loss. Sadly, it's not the only loss we must endure. Many bereaved parents fail to realize that the moment our child dies, we begin to experience secondary losses. And these, like the devastating loss of our child, must also be grieved. For those new to the term secondary losses, it refers to the collateral damage that comes as a result of the death of a loved one. So this is all the other stuff that changes your life the minute you experience that loss. So personally for me, my mother is a very prideful person to talk about her thick skin, that she can kind of like walk through life, just take in all that life kind of throws at her and can get through it. And is not a crier. And I grew up thinking like, this is something to be proud of. Like if I ever cried, it was, people would be like, oh, like everybody would stop. I was so thick-skinned and I built such a protection around myself. And after my loss, I mean, I literally feel up like if it's beautiful weather outside and I feel overwhelmed by the beauty, I'm like get filled up in tears. I'm like, feel like I'm always on edge. It's like it took my armor, broke it off, and now I'm just like raw skin that like feels everything to its like full impact. So that's probably my biggest thing, how I've changed after that. Relationships, that's one that's like huge for me. Just nobody understands you anymore. You don't even understand yourself anymore, let alone knowing how to interact with people that haven't gone through a loss like that. So relationships are really just take that toll. And I think mine, which every week it's like it unravels another layer, but mine is just like my fear base. Like I literally am brought to like full anxiety when I experience fear. Fear of death, fear of my life, of my child's life, of anything. It's just like this fear base because I know that the worst can happen. I've gone through it. So like my fear that it will happen again is like, oh, it definitely probably will. So if something provokes that fear, I go right into like, this is it. Something bad is going to happen from this. So those are kind of my big ones. Angie, like what comes up for you when you think about the secondary losses that you've endured?
Yeah. So mine are more things that I noticed like around the time of my losses. So they were a long time ago for me. But I remember after having lost Callan, that my first baby, that I didn't trust that another pregnancy would actually be
Mm.
successful.
Mm.
So for me, it was a secondary loss was being able to be pregnant without this kind of specter of pregnancy loss, like kind of, you know, flying over me.
Mhm.
After we lost Andrew, there was this moment where a family member wanted to kind of disassemble his nursery. We had been slowly putting it together, and like I didn't want that. So when we got home, my son's nursery was there, was like waiting for him. We had been like joyfully preparing. And so now this, you know, it was a nursery that I had created around a childhood book that I had loved and was so important and meaningful to me. And now that childhood memory will always be associated with the loss of my
Mm.
son because of his death.
Mm.
So now, because of the nursery being the same, so now, like, there's this new association, this
Mm.
that wasn't there before,
Mhm.
of grief and loss. And so, to me, like, that was a secondary loss that that I've experienced is the association of something from childhood that was pure with this now feeling of like grief and overwhelming pain.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. And do you mind me asking what that was? Like, what was the theme?
Yeah, sure. So it was The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, a book
Oh,
from
yeah.
childhood. I totally decked out, had
Oh,
all the characters like painted on the wall, had like a
yeah.
lamp post as a nightlight.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was real, like we had gone all out. And I had shared that with my son because I loved it so much and wanted to give that experience to my son. And then after I'm coming home from the hospital with empty arms, which
Yeah.
is another secondary loss, actually leaving the hospital without a baby is an experience you weren't expecting to have. And that is another loss that happens.
Mm-hmm.
But, coming home and having this nursery set up that, had just poured like my love into
Yeah.
and now that was associated with sadness.
Mm-hmm.
Um yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that just that idea, I think we can kind of like dive into this part too, like that bliss that you experience in that first pregnancy where you have no doubt that's going to work out. Like that's not even, you're just focusing on just like, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to decorate the nursery? How are we going to plan the baby shower? How are we going to like what are they going to name that? Like all these things are like your focus is on them living. It's never even occurring to you that it's going to end any other way. And then as soon as they die, you're you're no longer going to believe in things working out. Like you get that taken away. Not just my next pregnancy might not work out. It's like, will anything work out? You like that blissfulness of just like thinking that because it's good now, it's going to last forever. That this isn't going to be taken away from me. Um, and then you're going through this other pregnancy just with so much fear and really it's just like, will I survive? Will they survive? Will how long will they survive? Like there's no
Mhm.
end to that, you know? You can even give birth and then it's those stages of, well, they're not 18 months yet. So we still have SIDS, we still have all of these risks. Something could go wrong.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I think that's a huge one, just that like that bliss, it's just gone. It's taken and you can never, there's just, at least my experience, there's no way of ever getting that back if you're ever
Mhm.
pregnant again.
Yeah. Yeah, there is that idea of like that loss of innocence that comes when there is it's a violation of like core beliefs, right? So core beliefs are kind of like the foundational way that we look at the world. It's kind of like, our worldview. And
Mm-hmm.
when something so painful as the loss of a child happens, that really does challenge that core belief that the world is a safe place, that
Mm,
things proceed in like an orderly fashion, that I can have trust and faith that things are going to proceed the way that they normally do. Um, when you have a pregnancy loss, it can be extremely challenging to that worldview. And that also can be a secondary loss, is it's not only the loss of a child, it's the loss of a worldview, of a core belief about the way that the
yeah.
world operates.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, there are people who, when they learn that their child has died, they just say things like, this is not how it's supposed to be. This is wrong,
Yeah.
right? Because it is that violation of a core belief. You know, we had this unstated, unacknowledged, like a totally subconscious belief that you get pregnant and you have a baby. Pregnancy equals baby. Like we
Mm,
just believe that, right?
yeah.
And after a loss, you may not have that anymore. Like that core belief has been challenged. And so that also is a loss because it absolutely changes the way that you view the world. Now, of
Mhm.
course, like you said, not everybody's experience is exactly the same,
Yeah.
but many parents who have experienced a loss do go on to say that the way that they approach like future pregnancies is very, very different. There is much more of an awareness of the possibility of pain, of loss, a much more of an awareness that medical appointments are different. They're not just, oh, I'm going in for a checkup. Now there really is the possibility that they may discover something is not okay at this appointment.
Yeah.
Going in for that 20-week ultrasound or any ultrasound, there are people who have like trauma reactions
Yeah.
to hearing a baby's heartbeat on a Doppler because they
Mm,
remember when there was no heartbeat
yeah.
and they were waiting for to hear that.
Yeah.
So these are like secondary losses, this change of the way that you look at the future, especially when it comes to future pregnancies. Um, yeah, every time you encounter a milestone within the pregnancy, it just looks a little different. And very often is tinged with an awareness that that tragedy is possible, that pain is possible. And it wasn't like that the first time around. You at the first you approached it naively and innocently with your core belief intact that things work out. This is going to be okay. Pregnancy equals baby. And that doesn't, you don't get to keep that after the loss.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the biggest thing that hits me when you're talking about this is just like not feeling safe. Like I think that's one of the things that's stayed with me this whole time is just, I never feel safe. I never feel reassured. I never feel like this is gonna be okay. Right. Cause it's like in just an instant, one appointment, one checkup,
Mhm.
1 week, 1 month, everything can be taken from you and everything can change so abruptly. And
Mhm.
then you just got to like sort out your life to figure out how do I go from here.
Yeah.
So yeah, you have that innocence of feeling safe in a world that's kind of protected you from an experience
Mhm.
that just kind of opens you up to,
Yeah.
hey, anything could happen. Like the things that you just couldn't even think of or come up with could potentially happen. So then you're
Mhm.
like, it's the fear of the unknown of not knowing what could happen.
Right.
Um, and then I guess going into those milestones, you have the milestones during pregnancy that are just like each one you hit, you're just like, you can breathe a little bit more. You can breathe a little bit more. But then after that loss, now you have all those things you didn't get. Like you didn't have the opportunity to share with that child. So um, maybe it was an earlier loss and you never got to feel them kick.
Mhm.
Maybe it was not being able to hold them after they had passed. Maybe it was not being able to see them take a breath or live for a couple hours. Um, and then it's like the first birthday, um, watching them walk. What would they look like?
Mhm.
How would they sound? And you start to go through all these times as you reach these dates after the loss. And it's just that reminder, like, they would be here. And what would that look like? And how would my life look?
Mhm.
And if you have children that are living, what would that look like to see them together, to have a sibling? Yeah, I think with my son, it's like he's here. You know, we have two sisters that are passed away, and it's just him. And I look at him and I think, you would have had a twin. Like, how incredible
Mhm.
would that be to watch you have another little person just like you that was born alongside you? And we'll never get that. To him, he lives in this alone.
Mhm.
But like the what ifs, if he had that little sibling, and how would that make my life look, you know? So
Mhm.
yeah, the milestones are huge. What were some of like the hardest milestones for you after your loss?
Yeah. I think for me, I had a really, there was something really wound up for me in the idea of being a boy mom.
Mm,
So my first baby, Callan passed so early. We don't know if Callan was a girl or a boy. My next baby, Andrew, is a son.
mm,
And so learning that he was a
mm,
boy and would have been
mm,
the first living grandson,
mhm,
instead wound up being the first grandson and the first grandson who died.
mm,
So there was losses in that.
yeah.
Um, so when I found out that my first living child was a boy, there was a sense of gratitude in that and also a sense of loss that now I'm going to find out everything that I didn't get to have
Mm. Oh, yeah,
with
yeah, that's
Andrew.
true. Yeah.
So, I mean, so now my eldest living is, almost 17 years old. And the other day, this is recent. I, gave Alex a hug, put my head to their chest, and could hear their heart beating.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, I never got to do this with Andrew.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another time I'm sitting on my bed and a child sits down on the bed and I feel the weight of that child like move the mattress. And I
Mm,
immediately thought, I never got to feel Andrew
mm,
sit on a bed next to me.
mhm, mhm.
So there's every one of these little moments that I have the blessing of being able um, to experience with other children. They make me aware that these are blessings that I didn't get to have with my older children.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so I mean, there's just it's almost like if you think of like perfume kind of like floating through the air, it'll be these like little wafts of loss, wafts of grief, wafts of just realization. A lot of families talk about, as their children reach some of those milestone ages. So my child would have been 5 this year, they would have started kindergarten. And then they see all of the little kindergartners, taking their half day bus.
Yeah.
My child would have been, 12 this year, going to their first dance. Oh, now it's
Yeah.
prom, now it's graduation. And then you might have children or, have other people that are getting married in their mid 20s or whatever. And you think, wow, I never got to dance with my child at their
Yeah.
wedding.
Yeah.
So those secondary losses, they're real.
Yeah.
Um, and they can, and I want to be careful not to make it sound like there's like just a life of like continual sadness that's
No,
going
I
to
know.
happen
Yeah.
for like
Yeah.
lost parents.
Yeah.
Because the reality is that for me, I see all of those as also like wafts of love. Like my child is
Mhm,
always with me. They are never
mhm.
forgotten. I remember them. And all of those, people, that 5-year old, that 12-year old, that person on their wedding day, I would have loved them even now. I
Yes.
still love them even now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that indescribable thing of like the two faces of grief and love. that kind of continue through life
Yeah.
with us.
Yeah.
We feel the grief, we feel that secondary loss, but it's also a continuation of the love that we have for our child.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for me, I'm like, the more we're talking, so my first daughter, Audrey, was named after Audrey Hepburn. And because I don't know anything about my daughter, I don't know what she would have liked. Being that I named her after Audrey Hepburn, I mean, I loved Audrey Hepburn, of course, that's why I named her after her, but like, I didn't like want to know everything about Audrey Hepburn. And now it's like the only thing I have to like live through like what I think she would have been like. Like I'm actually using Audrey Hepburn's life and her story and her movies and using that as a way to connect to my daughter because I have no photos. I have no what she would have been like. But in some way I envision that she is her so that I can attach to it like a real person and
Mhm.
somebody that like I can watch and
Yeah.
hear. And the more I watch Audrey Hepburn, the more I fall in love with her. And I'm like, yes, this is my daughter. This is
Mhm.
like I named her after this so that I would have this relationship
Mhm.
to continue to grow and like build. But like that's all I have. So like I'm really reaching for something, but it's because I need to fulfill that. Like that just not getting to know what she would have been like is
Mhm.
so hard. So it's like just trying to figure out ways that you can connect with them. Um,
Mhm.
but you're right. It's like those little moments when you feel them with you
Mhm.
that the grief overwhelms you, but then the love is just like you feel their love and then you can express that love and acknowledge it. But
Mhm.
yeah, it happens just like little
Mhm.
blips and
Yeah.
all these little moments that you don't expect.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And I think too, with all those secondary losses, there are good things that happen to us, right?
Mhm.
Like, yes, we might lose our identity, we might lose relationships, but we might find ourselves in a new way that we didn't know we could. We might start new relationships that just beyond our expectations on what connection could be.
Yeah.
So I don't want to just focus, even though that's what we are focusing on, just know that like with those losses, you will have gains in
Mhm.
different ways that I don't think we would ever be open to. It's
Yeah.
not worth it. We don't want those things to have happened, but they did. And then we can kind of look and say, hey, this did happen. I'll take
Yeah.
it. I'll take
Yeah.
whatever I can. Because
Mm.
I wish this didn't happen, but it did. And I'll take it where
Yeah.
I can. And just
Mhm.
focusing on those little things. And I think when I think of my daughters and not getting to be a girl mom, um, I just started a new job this year and I'm working with a kindergartner who is the most perfect little girl. And she has a chromosome um, abnormality, just like my daughter did. And it like, some ways I feel like life pieced me with her so that I
Mm.
could have a daughter type of relationship with a
Mhm.
child that she's exactly the same age as my
Mhm.
daughter would be. She's an older kindergartner and just the love that we've experienced. So yes, I would want my daughter here, but like
Mhm.
sometimes life will hand you
Yeah.
things in different ways, just like how your family's just expanded, right? Like
Mhm.
those opportunities and the way your heart was so open to all of that.
Mhm.
Who knows? Who knows if your life would be the way it is,
Right.
you know?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Yeah, and I love there's a word that you used there when you said attach to your daughter.
mhm,
And I think that that is like one of the things that we do when we are doing the work of grief, right? So when we are grieving, one of the things that, psychologists believe is important is the idea of finding ongoing attachments to the person who has been lost, right? So we used
Wow.
to talk about, move on,
Yeah.
say goodbye and let them go. That
Yeah.
used to be the way that people talked about grief. And we actually don't talk about grief that way anymore because now through listening to people who have been grieving, we understand that it isn't about letting go and leaving people in the past. It's about finding new ways to connect with our love for those people here in the present.
Mm-hmm.
So, Audrey Hepburn, that is a bonding,
Yeah.
like, thing for you
Yeah.
toward your daughter.
Yeah.
The little girl, that you
Yeah.
are able to to express like kindness to is a way for you to express love for your daughter.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. None of us would ever choose to not have our children here. And yet, our love for them redeems the grief we feel.
Mm.
So that many of us, as we heal, we find ways to express the love that we have for our children into the world somehow. So you and I have talked before, and if you're watching this, you might go and look for other videos where I've talked about the pebble dropping into the pond, right, or into the puddle, and there being ripples, right? Because our children are beautiful and perfect and wholly and completely loved by us, the good that their existence does in the world um, is a beautiful thing. Even if wish they were still here, we can also say that they were here, and because they were here, this beautiful stuff happens.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, thank you. That sounds like the perfect way to end this. It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so true. So on that, we just want to touch on the fact that this week is National Infertility Awareness Week. For those of you, myself included, just going through that journey of infertility and then experiencing a loss is like, it feels like everybody's against you. Like this is something you're not supposed to get. You fight so hard and then you lose it. And then you've got to start that battle again to then maybe lose again. So we see you. We're here to support you. And we hope that this awareness will just help other families know that they're not alone and that there are ways to build beautiful families, and so many resources out there to do that. So on Wednesday, make sure to wear orange, so that you can just let that awareness be out there. And for our May group, we are still going to do an in-person, but we thought it was very important that we get together on Bereaved Mother's Day, which is May 7th. It's the Sunday before, every year, the Sunday before Mother's Day, is Bereaved Mother's Day. And we feel like being together on that day is so sacred, for us lost moms to be together. We love for you to bring family. We're going to meet at the Lidditz Spring Park, we're going to do 4 to 5:30 p.m. We'll put out an invite on our website and Facebook. We really hope you can join us. We're going to talk about exploring and asserting your unique motherhood. We will have a little artistic kind of walk around the park, collecting beautiful things that remind us of our precious babies, and then kind of get back together for a group. So we really hope that you can meet us there, and keep an eye on our website for all those updates. Angie, thank you so much for sharing with us and opening up. I feel like tonight was just a really good time for us to, really get in there and share ourselves with everyone. So thank you for that.
My
Okay.
pleasure.